Thank you, Kees. Thank you, Jaap. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, everybody. I've been here for 3 days, and I felt very welcome, although this is not really my group. I'm not a contextual therapist, but I felt very welcome, and I felt also this wonderful atmosphere of dialogue in this conference. So thank you for inviting me here. I made a lot of changes to my PowerPoint because I got so much ideas from the workshops and the lectures, and so I made changes yesterday and this morning. I must say I also have some hesitation to speak because I don't know that much about. For instance, I never heard before this conference that there was a fifth dimension. So I feel like I should shut up about contextual therapy, and I'm not going to say too much about it. One of the things I noticed when you people present is that all of you start with saying something personal about your family of origin. And I hadn't prepared it, but I'm going to do it too. This is a long story. I'm going to make it brief. The guy in the middle is me, and then the other boy there to the right is my older brother, and the baby is my younger brother. And I came across this photograph a few months ago, leafing through family albums, and it struck me. I knew this photograph. I've seen it so many times, but then just a few months ago I saw it again, and then it struck me, and I thought, what an odd photograph. It's so strange for people. I've seen a lot of family albums and so on. It's so strange for people to have a photograph of a crying child in the album. Most of the times, photo albums in families are about celebrations or about parties or about graduations or whatever, but this is very strange. I talked about it with my mother, and she said, yes, but when your brother was born, he was born with a physical defect, and he had a lot of pain. He had a defect in his intestines, and he had a lot of pain. He had a lot of operations during the first months of his life. And he was also sent to a foster family. And I remember that family because my brother is now 56 years old, but he kept contact with that family, and he had a very good relationship with that family. So I knew that family, but I didn't know exactly how it started. Anyway, for me, the very important thing is my eyes on the, and I think you recognize these eyes. These are the eyes of a parentified child. I'm looking at, my mother is taking the picture. I'm looking at my mother, and at that period, she told me she was depressed. And I look at my mother, and I ask myself, what is going on with you? With one hand, I got my brother's hand, and I think I got the assignment of my mother, try to calm him down, because I want to take a picture. The clothes of my brother, these are, in our family, every child that was born is baptized in that robe. And I think that I was much more concerned about my mother, who couldn't stop my brother from crying, than with what would happen there. Okay, so I think you understand why I became a therapist by looking at this. I distributed a story in the attic in the dark yesterday. I hope you got a chance to read it. It is, in fact, my attempt to try to understand what goes through the mind of a child before the child goes to therapy. And it's a child that was at 7, was 7 years old, he got as a present his own bedroom in the attic. And he was very pleased with that because he was becoming a big boy and now he didn't sleep with his sister anymore. He got his own bedroom, but he was afraid because of the sounds in the attic. And then there was a nephew who said, your grandfather committed suicide. And he started to fantasize that his grandfather committed suicide by hanging himself from one of the beams in the attic. And he tried to control his anxiety, but he didn't succeed. And he talked to his father, and his father said, well, it's an old house, of course, it cracks, but don't tell your mother. And then he started to fantasize about his mother. Why doesn't she come up to the bedroom? Why doesn't she put me to bed? She used to do that when I was sleeping in the bedroom of my sister, which is a floor down. And he doesn't understand. And at a certain moment, he really becomes very anxious, and he runs down, and then the parents say, you have to go to therapy. And his fantasy is, yes, I have to go to therapy, but how is this therapist going to help me and protect me against the ghost of my grandfather? Okay, I saw this is my imagination, how I try to understand the child coming to therapy with anxiety. The case story I'm going to tell is real, but it's combined, 3 families combined. So in order to, for confidentiality. The father phoned me and he said, my son of 7, Liam, is the youngest of 2, he has nightmares, and it started when he moved to the bedroom. I gave them an appointment. I was surprised that he phoned. Usually the mothers phone in Belgium. I don't know in Holland or in the rest of the world, but in Belgium the mothers usually phone when there's something wrong with the children. But now it was a father, so I didn't know exactly what it meant, but anyway, I gave him an appointment. I invited him and his wife and his son, and I gave him a questionnaire. We used the worries questionnaire. Case I told you how I start with families, and I tell them families come to therapy when at least somebody is worried about something. So I'm not talking about the problem or the diagnosis or the whatever, it's somebody is worried. So we use, for a few years now, we use what we call the worries questionnaire. And well, it's so strange how the PowerPoint changes it. But anyway, the question is, on the first page, the 2 pages, the first page, the question is, who is most worried in your family? And I ask it, and I ask the father to fill it out, and the mother to fill it out, and the son to fill it out, and the daughter to fill it out. And they have to fill out who's most worried. And then they have to describe what is this person worried about. Okay, that's the first page. The second page, I ask not who is most worried, but how worried are you? And how worried are you? And how worried are you? How worried are you? And about what? Okay? And this is a questionnaire that I sent to the families before the first session. I asked them to send it back before the first session. So before the first session, I know already something about the different worries that are there in the family. For this presentation, I'm presenting the answers in the table form. So you see there, mother. Maybe one thing you can already see is that everybody, this is who is the most worried, and this is how worried are you, okay? And everybody agrees that mother is the most worried. This often happens. If you ask in a family who is the most worried, very often everybody says she, mother. And then you see what, according to them, she is worried about. So mother says about herself, he has nightmares and he's scared to go to sleep. I'm worried 10 to 10. Father says she's worried about Liam's nightmares, more or less the same. Liam says she's worried about me. But sister says Liam's fears are a heavy burden for her. This sounds a bit different already. So I wonder what does it mean. But then when you look at what are the others worried about, then the father is much more worried about confidence. He wants to be a big boy, but in fact, Liam talks about the ghost, and the sister seems to be very concerned about the mother. Okay? So this is what I know beforehand. Okay, then we go to the first session, and in the first session, father, mother, and Liam are present, and we get acquainted and we talk about things, and Liam plays soccer, and that's nice because I like soccer. And father says, yes, I played soccer too. I played in the first division in Belgium, but then I got injured. I was only 19 years old. But what was very clear is that mother was not at ease, and she didn't make eye contact. And when I asked her, tell me something about yourself, something what you like in life, she said, well, I'm just mother. And I tried again, and I asked, what do you get up for in the morning? What's important? What makes a difference between a good day and a bad day? And she says something like, I just get up for the children. And it sounded as if she said, if I didn't have children, I wouldn't get up. But I didn't say anything about it, because I felt that this was something very sensitive, and I thought it's too early to talk about this now. Then I gave the worry questionnaires that they had filled out. I put them on the table, and we talked about that. And father said, yes, we're worried about the nightmares and so on. And they tell also the story that at a certain moment, Liam had a nightmare, was crying, and father went upstairs, and Liam told that he had a nightmare, that he woke up and that his mother was gone. All of a sudden she was gone, and father comforted him. While we were talking about these things, Liam was making a drawing. I usually have crayons and paper and so on the table, so children are very easily seduced to make a drawing. So he made this drawing of this house. And I saw it, and I asked Liam, can we talk about your house that you draw? Yes, he says, this is a house. And I say, tell me something more about the house. Yes, he says, this is a house, and in the attic there's a ghost. And I asked some more about the ghost, and says, the only thing that can protect a child against the ghost is the dog. The dog is not afraid of a ghost. Wow, but there is no dog, he says. So it was a bit disappointing for me, but then I went to the parents, and I asked the parents, did they think that this drawing had anything to do with the reason why they came? And they said, yes, it's obvious. He's afraid, and he's a good kid, but he's so scared and so on. And they said it in a very warm way, in a way in which they said, we're not going to let you be afraid like this. We're here with you, and we're going to do the best we can to help you. And then Liam said, yes, there is no dog in the house, but the parents are there. And it was clear for me that this opening towards the parents, the presence of the parents, was also a reaction, some kind of gratitude, because the parents made it clear that they were not going to let go of him. And then I asked, and that's something that maybe we have to talk some more. Then I asked to the parents, when you were children, how did you learn, what did you learn in your family of origin about how to deal with fears and anxiety? And father said, when I was not so much afraid, but when I was afraid, my parents came and reassured me. And mother said I was a frightened child, just like Liam. And I asked her, can we talk some more about that? And she said, I want to talk alone with you. Okay. So I discussed with the family, and they said, okay, it's okay to talk alone. So the next session, I talked to the mother, and she told the story that her mother died of cancer when she was 7. And a few months later, her father committed suicide, and she said he loved her so much that he couldn't live without her. She told about the loneliness she felt, the sadness she felt. She had a sister, but she felt mostly alone, and she cried herself to sleep. And she said, Liam's fears remind me of the past. And I asked her to explain, and she said, yes, in the first week when he was sleeping in the attic. He had a nightmare, and I went upstairs, and he told me about the nightmare, and I was reminded of the past, and I thought, I will never do that again. I will never go upstairs again. And I asked why? Because of the suicide of the father. And I asked, did your father kill himself in the attic? No, it was not in the attic. So that was part of the fantasy of the boy. And then I asked, did you talk with your children about the suicide? No, that's too difficult. And then I asked, did you talk to your sister about the suicide? And she said, no, that's also too difficult. And then I suggested, why don't you talk with her? And she said, let me think about it. I will get back to you. And next week, she sent me an email and she said, I will talk to my sister. Then it was the third session, a few weeks later, and father and mother came alone. And mother said it was a good idea to talk with my sister, but it was very difficult. We cried a lot. I talked with my sister, but her husband was there, and my husband was there, and they consoled me and us. And now I don't feel so alone anymore. And the husband said to me, yes, I was really angry with me, because you said that she should talk to her sister, because it was so emotional, but now I'm glad that she did. Okay, we talked about this, and she said she was really relieved. And then I said, why don't we talk with the whole family next time? Okay, so the next time I expected the whole family, but I came in the waiting room and there was only the parents. And Liam had said to the parents, I don't want to go. I want to go to play soccer. And Hannah, the sister, said, if he doesn't go, I am not coming. So the parents were there. And then mother said, yes, maybe it's a good thing that we can come without the children because a miracle happened. And I asked, what kind of miracle? And then she said, yes, after the talking with my sister, there was one more time in which Liam had a nightmare. And I went upstairs again for the first time in months. And he had the same nightmare as months ago, namely that he would wake up and that nobody was there. And then I told Liam, this is what happened to me. And I told Liam what happened to me about the suicide of my father and how I was lonely and so on. And we cried together. And it was good for us. And then he fell asleep and I went downstairs. And that was the last night that he had a nightmare. And since then, his anxiety is gone. So that's a miracle. So we made a new appointment, and I said again, is it possible to see the whole family? And the next session, the whole family was there. It was the first time I saw the sister, and I talked to her and I asked her, can you tell me something from your privileged position of a witness, because you've seen what happened through these months in the family? And she said that a lot had changed, that in the beginning when Liam was so anxious that sometimes at night he came downstairs back to the bedroom of the sister and he slept with his sister. And she said, of course he can sleep with me. It's fantastic that he sleeps alone now, but of course he can sleep with me. And Liam was sitting there like a prince. It was incredible. He was sitting there in his chair like this and enjoying the parents and the sister and me talking. And in the end, Hannah said, yes, you look like a prince. You shine so bright, I need my shades. This is just a short case. I usually have short cases. I think the average duration of a therapy for me is about 8 sessions. This is very short, of course, but usually it's, or in average, it's 8 sessions. Let us reflect a little bit on this case. First, I want to say something about what is not illustrated in the case, but still is very important, I think, for me in my work as a dialogical family therapist. I didn't use systematic feedback instruments. So since we use also the worries questionnaire, we use feedback instruments. We ask the family members after each session how they have experienced the previous session. And we have a questionnaires, and it's very simple, a few questions. When there are small children, it's with drawings, it's very simple. But I didn't talk about that, and I'm not going to say any more about that. Another thing that was not really present in this therapy, but is very often present in therapies, is enactment. That you ask family members to do something, to talk with each other, or to give them an assignment that they draw a house together or whatever. We didn't use it in this therapy. And then the inner dialogue, it was there, of course, but I'm not going to say too much about it. I said some things about reflections I had when I saw that mother was, that it was sensitive and that she maybe was a bit depressed, that she didn't want to get out of bed except for caring of the children. And my thinking about that and thinking I'm not going to talk about it right away because it's too sensitive. This kind of things, I'm not going to talk too much about that. What I want to say is that for us, the focus is on the dialogue. And this is interesting, and also this is also limited. I think in a dialogical frame, we don't have a lot of content knowledge. And we have it, but we go and get it everywhere, but not from the dialogical group. We have some content ideas about conflictual divorces. Justin van Lawik, for instance, worked around that. Psychosis, Jaakko Säkula worked a lot around psychosis. I'm working on family secrecy now. But for the rest, for the content, we very often borrow from other approaches. And for instance, I have done a research project on parentification, and I was very happy to be with Jennifer and Tatjana in the workshop, which was very interesting. But then again, I felt how much content ideas you have about parentification. And that if I know something about parentification, I learned it from Nash or from Minushin. Also, relational ethics, that's something very important. We don't have it, but we borrow it from Paul, from other people that from other people that inspire me, and from in Belgium in the contextual therapy community. Okay, so that's something we don't know much about. We know a lot about making room for all voices, and this is also in Janet, in your film, you talked about that. So I think this is really a communality. Maybe you would call it multi-directed partiality, I don't know. But I think it's very important for us, and we really try very hard to make space for all voices. And as Kees said how I start, this is very conscious that I start in that way. So I say a family therapist is somebody who talks to families when somebody is worried about something. I'm not saying when there is a problem. I'm not saying when there is a diagnosis. Somebody is worried about something. And then immediately you see that, for instance, in a family like this, everybody looks, just gives a glance at the mother. And then you know already, oh, she's the one who's worried. But by saying somebody is worried about something, I acknowledge the mother, because she's worried, but I also acknowledge the others. I'm saying somebody is worried, so somebody is not worried. So the others are also acknowledged. So these are some of the things that we do just to make room for all voices. Also, the worries questionnaire is an example for that. The difficulty is when we work with families, we're confronted with something like this. If this was a family, you see the diversity. Yeah? It's very difficult. You have this father figure, you have this older brother. There's no mother in the Stumpf family. Yeah? What's Smurfs? Smurfs in English. Yeah? There's no mother there. Yeah? But it's clear that it's much more difficult to hear the voice of a toddler than of an adult. So again, using drawings, for instance, is a way to also hear the voice of the child. It's very important for me, this person. This is in this case, the adolescent sitting on a bench, but people working with adolescents, they know adolescents, they sit like this. And they tell, with the whole body, they tell you, I don't want to be there. I want to be with my friends, or I want to be at my computer, but I don't want to be here. It's my mother who wants me to be here. And it's the whole body, but that's the only thing talking at that moment is the body. So, and that's, the people working with adolescents, when you see this, you know, okay, it's going to be a hard job. The first session with the family with adolescents is a hard job. If you want to talk with this one, if you want to talk with the father, it's simple, or with the mother, it's simple. Just ask what brings you here. And the mother starts to talk and about her concerns and so on, and she can talk for an hour. But the more that she talks, the more that the adolescent drifts away, and the less chance you will have to get him to talk. So this is the kind of thing that we really think a lot about. For me, in the first session with the family, I often mentally make this drawing. I make a continuum going from who's more likely to talk and who's more likely not to talk. And I try to see immediately, even in the waiting room, I try to see who's the one on the bench. Because I know I'm going to focus on the one on the bench in the first session. And we talk about hesitations, the importance of hesitation. Very often the one on the bench hesitates because there is something on the line. There is something important that cannot be said, but something sensitive that can be touched without knowing. So it's not just a question of you're going to blame me or whatever. No, maybe I'm worried because of my mother. Because when I'm going to talk, maybe I'm going to hurt her. Or maybe she's going to cry, and maybe she's going to become depressed again. Okay? So this is not only, this can also be caring for the other. Okay? So it's not only protection of the self, but very often it's also caring for the other. And then what I try to do as fast as I can is acknowledging that silence is a valuable way of being, and then trying to understand what are the good reasons for this silence. And good reasons can be also previous conversations. Very often in my context, the context where I work, we are a bit of an end-of-the-line team. That means that families coming to us have very often been in different places, and then they come to us because they don't know anywhere else to go. And then it's the end of the line. So they have been with different therapists. And very often, the one who hesitates because of what happened in the previous therapy. And so very often you have to talk about what happened in the previous therapies in order for him or her to become more open. But the first thing is not to try to convince him or to motivate him or whatever, but to sit next to him and to say, I want to try to understand why it's maybe not such a good idea to start the therapy. So I never do motivating, in fact. Very central in our way of thinking is the idea of responsive attunement. In several workshops, I heard that for instance, in the workshop of Albert, I heard that you referred to Bertine saying that the worst thing that can happen is that you don't get a response. And so this is really a very important thing. As a therapist, I try to attune, but in a responsive way. And this responsiveness has to do with several aspects. It's responsive towards the other, but it's also responsive towards myself. This is the model for the intrapersonal attunement. Some things I can talk about. I have words for it. I can explain to anybody. Some things are much more difficult to talk about, but my body will tell the story. And some things are maybe impossible to talk about, but maybe you can experience them. So these are three levels in which stories can be heard, in which we can listen. these are also 3 levels in which we can be present as a therapist. We can listen to the story, we can invite and explore hesitations, and we can try to be aware for what cannot be said, but we can maybe experience. This idea of experiences, this is something that I was with in this wonderful workshop of Tatiana and Emoke and Ibrahim about trauma. And this is something that we learned from the trauma research, that trauma victims very often cannot talk about what really happened, but very often they can make you feel it, experience it. Yeah? I remember one case in which I felt very confused about talking to a woman who was abused by her father, and I felt very confused, and I went to my supervisor and I explained why I was confused. I tried to be closer to her, I had the impression that she wanted to be heard, and I came closer and she pushed me away. She said, "You don't understand." And all the time I tried to become closer and I was pushed away. And so my supervisor said, "Maybe you have to talk about your confusion." So the next session I told her, "I was confused by the way you reacted and she became angry and she said, "You confused? You don't know what confusion is." And then she started to talk about her confusion. And she said, "You know what confusion is? I was 7 years old. I was lying in my bed and I was waiting for the footstep of my father. My father came in the room, came in my bed and raped me. And then he went away and I said good night. And the next morning at the breakfast table, he was sitting there just eating his breakfast. And when I came down, he said, 'Oh, there's my lovely girl. Sit down, have breakfast. What a wonderful day.' That's confusion. You don't know what confusion is." And for me, this is important because this process that she can make me experience confusion, and when I have processed it with the help of my supervisor, and I give it back to her, then she can talk about it, but only then. And this is something that we often do. And in that sense, the awareness, which is very often working on in an inner conversation, that awareness is very important. This is a letter I got from a mother that she came with a second husband and a son in therapy. And she came because of her daughter, who had psychosis again. She has been schizophrenic for a long time, and they came to us, and I was doing the therapy with a colleague, and the mother told a story about everything they have tried and everything that didn't work, and she said, "Help me! You really have to tell me how to. This has to be solved." And she had a very direct question: "Tell me what to do." But at the same time, she told the story, I've tried everything, I've been in this therapy and with that psychiatrist and so on. We tried medication, nothing works. And so I felt powerless. And I said to her, I don't know if I can help you. I feel so powerless, and it's so impressive, all the long road you've been going together, but I don't think I can give you something new. You tried everything. I felt like a bad therapist. I really was mobilized by the suffering in the family, and I felt I can do nothing. And then after a few days, I got this letter, which was, in fact, it was an email. And she said, "We are nowhere nearer to a solution, and God knows that there probably is no solution to our problem. But for the first time in our long career of consulting psychiatrists and psychologists, we felt understood rather than blamed. These professionals don't understand how all their hypotheses about the causes of our problems and all their advices about what we should do have hurt us." She had been asking for advice from me all the time. They did not seem to see how much we have done already. They did not seem to be interested in how we suffer. I still get emails from her. This is years ago. I think 5, 6 years ago. I don't know, years ago. She still sends me emails. I saw this family a second time. I never saw the daughter. But she claims that this session changed everything. The daughter now is married. She hasn't done any suicidal attempts anymore. She hasn't been in a psychiatric hospital anymore. And the last email I got from her, from mother, is to ask me to vote for her daughter. She's a DJ. And there was, on the internet, there was a contest of DJs, and there was a YouTube film where she was DJing, and she asked me, can you vote for my daughter? I never saw the daughter except on the film. But this is for me important, because I felt powerless. And it was not something, she came in very combative. I want to fight this illness. And I felt the powerlessness. And it's when I gave it back to her that we got this. Okay. This is the same thing in another way. You see on the left, you see the client, on the right, the therapist, and you have an outer conversation with the responsive attunement. The therapist is talking to the client. And as a therapist, I try to be responsive and to attune to the client, but the client does the same. Also, the client attunes to me. And at the same time, when I'm talking to the client, I'm also talking to myself. I'm talking in words, but I feel also things. I have images and so on, but the client too. Let's say the mother, when she came to the individual session to me, after she said, I want to talk with you alone, and she came to the individual session, probably for a few weeks before that session, she already was thinking, what am I going to tell Peter? From my experience that I have not yet talked about, from the suicide of my father, from the loneliness that I felt, from the anxiety that I felt as a child, what am I going to say? And then she came in the conversation with me, and then started the responsive attunement between us. And gradually, she started to say more and more and more. And maybe she could have said more, probably. And I will never expect that everything will be said. But some things were said that meant a lot for her. And at the same time, I do the same. I try to also be in contact with who I am, and some of the things that I'm thinking, I will share with the client, and some of them I will keep for myself. So that's an image with an inner dialogue and an outer dialogue of an individual session. This is an image of a session with both parents or with a couple. So you have the mother and the father, but also the mother and the father, there is a responsive attunement between them. So it's not only between me and the mother and between me and the father, but also between them. And I remember when mother was quiet like that in the first session and she didn't make eye contact. And I was thinking about maybe she's depressed, but I didn't say it. I saw that father and son looked away. They knew there was something that we could talk about, but they also decided not to talk about it at that moment. This is also something that's here. Maybe when mother says something, father will also attune also, and maybe say something, yes, I know what you mean, darling. You mean blah, 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 blah. Or maybe say, no, that's not what you mean, and so on. So there's also attunement between family members. And then, of course, it's more difficult in a family, because this is a family with Liam, and all of them are in a responsive attunement with each other, but also with themselves. So I sometimes think that we have a very difficult profession. And this is I think it's about...
You have een paar minuten om het af te ronden.
Okay.
Kan dat?
Yep.
Ja?
Okay. I always make my PowerPoints much too long.
Your treasury is so full of stories, and so just tell them for a few minutes.
Just a few minutes. For me, it's important. I have the feeling when I walk around here these 2-3 days that you're thinking about the future. And I think that we as family therapies, and I liked what Karin says about how the relational level is important. And I think it's important that we work together. And that we don't make too much of the divides between the different approaches. I think I can learn from you. And I've learned from a lot of people. Sometimes people ask me, who was your teacher? And I say people from different schools. I say Minuchin and Michael White and Nudge and so on, from different schools, but these are all people that inspired me. I think that's important. I think it's important to hold on our strongest point, which is the setting. We work with relationships, we work with couples, we work with families. And I think that's important. And this fits with outcome research, and this is a bit strange. Outcome research says that, in fact, what's most important is the client and the context of the client and the relationship with the therapist. And these are two factors that we are very good at. A third point is the therapist as a person, and the therapist as a person is important in the concept or in the context of attunement. We have to be flexible. At the same time, we have to believe in our approach, but at the other side, we have to be flexible and we have to attune to our clients. And if this is our strong point, and so I think that we have to invest in that and not in the struggles between schools and the discussions about differences and so on. So let's be open and curious. For me, this is. A few years ago, I went to the United States for a conference, and they asked me they asked every keynote speaker to make one slide in which you would put the most important thing of being a family therapist. And I thought, in the beginning, I cannot do it. But then the mother of Annie, who wrote, the mother of the DJ who wrote that, she once sent me an email and she said, what I learned in your therapy, in these 2 sessions, is that being a family means you're part of something wonderful. It means you will love and be loved forever, no matter what. That's what she wrote me. And then I thought, yes, I know what I'm going to do with the slide. And I took her words, and I like elephants. And so this is a family of elephants. But of course, as you know, families don't have fathers. But let's say that the big one is a father, but it's a mother or a grandmother. But the meaning is a family is strong, and a family takes care of each other. And that's a strong thing we have. And of course, when families come to us at first, love is not the first thing that they come in with. Probably it's disappointment, it's anger, and so on and so on. But they cannot believe in love anymore, but we have to. And if we don't believe in the love that's behind the anger and so on, then there's no hope. So for me, and that's also fantastic that Marina has this love method also, we are allowed again to talk about love, and I'm so happy about that. It's also something I'm grateful for Sue Johnson, because love can be taught. I think we don't always mean exactly the same thing, but that's not important. It's important that we talk about love again. Okay, thank you very much.